This is a community-supported legal education channel. Find out how you can support our mission at the links in the description below. So there was a story came across my feed over the weekend that really got my skin crawling, and I was really angry about this. We're just going to jump into it here. Plaintiff Andrea Anderson, or Andrea, I don't know, I'm just going to call her Andrea, sorry if I'm incorrect, Ms. Anderson, through her attorneys, files this complaint against CVS, Atkin Pharmacy Services, Thrifty White Pharmacy, and George Badeau. Plaintiff Andrea Anderson is a mom and a licensed foster parent. She and her partner have lived in McGregor, Minnesota for several years. McGregor is a small town with only one pharmacy, Thrifty White. In January 2019, Anderson's contraception failed. She obtained a prescription for an emergency contraception, Ella, and had her doctor send it to McGregor Thrifty White Pharmacy. She acted quickly because any delay in obtaining emergency contraception carries the increased risk of pregnancy. The pharmacist on duty told her that he would be unable to fill her prescription because of his, quote, beliefs. He also warned her against trying ShopGo, another pharmacy in the surrounding area. The pharmacist did not provide Anderson with any information about how she could get her prescription filled. Anderson next tried a CVS pharmacy in Aitkin, Minnesota, 20 miles away. And this is Minnesota, and I don't know if this is in the winter or not, but that could be a difficult trek. 20 miles could be a long ways away. The CVS pharmacist also indicated that she could not fill the prescription. The pharmacist then claimed that she called a pharmacist at the Walgreens in Barnard, Minnesota, who told her that they could not fill the prescription either. Anderson later confirmed with that Walgreens pharmacist that they did speak with the pharmacist from CVS, but that Walgreens had told CVS that Walgreens could, in fact, fill the prescription. Though Anderson finally found a pharmacy that was willing to fill her prescription, it was over 50 miles from her home. Meanwhile, a massive snowstorm was headed to central Minnesota. Given the increased risk of pregnancy from any delay in taking emergency contraception, Anderson drove over 100 miles round trip in a snowstorm in order to fill her prescription. While the drive normally takes over 2 hours round trip, that day it took over 3 hours in light of the storm. The defendants in this case singled out healthcare that only people who may become pregnant need, emergency contraception, and refuse to provide it. Defendants also tried to prevent plaintiff from obtaining that care from others by putting delays and obstacles in her path, failing to provide her a reasonable alternative, and in one instance, even apparently intentionally deceiving her about where she could obtain care. Plaintiff brings this lawsuit to remedy illegal discrimination based on her sex through denying her service as a result of her pregnancy-related health care needs in violation of the Minnesota Human Rights Act. That is unacceptable. It is one thing to have religious beliefs. In my opinion, as a former religious person who went to church every week for 23 years, who taught Bible school, who can quote you the Bible, this is not what God wants. This is not what Jesus would do. This is probably not legal, and this is definitely immoral. It's also ignorant and stupid, because that's not how emergency contraception works. Emergency contraception is not an abortion. Cue technical.
Yes, this is my backyard. I have a real passion for birth control in terms of the science behind it. So the hormonal emergency contraception is usually a large dose of progesterone. Progesterone comes from the word progestational, as in pro-pregnancy. Progesterone rises in pregnancy. This means it's not going to harm an implanted fertilized egg. And if an egg has already been fertilized, it's not going to stop it from implanting. The only thing that it does is prevent ovulation, because once a woman becomes pregnant and her progesterone rises, the body goes, oh, don't need to ovulate
Does that
anymore.
prevented egg die?
No, it just doesn't get released.
Or does it remain in its ovary? That's where they belong, right? Like, I'm sorry, I'm a guy.
So there's a follicle that will have the egg, and then the follicle, prior to ovulation, the follicle is going to get bigger and more developed. When you ovulate, the follicle bursts and the egg is released. When you prevent ovulation, the follicle usually starts to shrink down, and it sort of reverses that growth, and then you don't get the explosion that leads to the egg being released.
Okay. And is the egg then unviable after that? Just trying to get to the line to make sure we know exactly where this line is, because some people define the line, at conception, or maybe the egg itself is worthy of protection or something. And I'm just trying to determine, not that it affects my opinion anymore at this point, but
if you did not take any other hormonal birth control afterwards, that follicle may, grow again and then release the egg later. It's also going to depend, because if you're on hormonal birth control, most hormonal birth control prevents ovulation.
Okay.
And not everything,
so
but most.
We're, as far as we know, we're not even destroying eggs.
No.
There's a chance, but it's not a guarantee either.
When you take Plan B or Ella or whatnot before ovulation, then it's effective. If you take it after ovulation, you have exactly as many pregnancies as would be expected.
So it's not even terminating It's not terminating pregnancies. No. It doesn't terminate pregnancies.
It does not terminate
what we're talking
pregnancies,
about here.
And it does not prevent a fertilized egg from implanting.
It's one thing to have my religious beliefs. It's another thing for me to impose them on others. That seems to be an intentional act, an almost, if I may, a violent act. You are taking an act against someone's medical needs. You are making an act that is physical in nature. This person needs treatment, and you are not just denying them treatment, you're attempting to prevent them from getting the proper treatment from a facility that's willing to provide it. Anyway, we're going to be talking forever if we don't move on. Emergency contraception is a method of birth control that can be used when a regular control method did not work properly. Emergency contraception works by delaying or preventing ovulation. If an individual is already pregnant, a fertilized egg has implanted, and emergency contraception will not stop or harm the pregnancy. There's Ella and Plan B. They're both registered and safe, and they're for people based mostly on weight, it seems. And Ella is only available with a prescription, which is why she had to get a prescription. On January 20th, their condom failed. She did not want to get pregnant, so she called the next morning to her OBGYN, who prescribed and sent the Ella prescription to Thrifty White Pharmacy in McGregor, Minnesota. At that time, Thrifty White was the only pharmacy and was her primary pharmacy, so I guess she hadn't had a problem with them before. She called Thrifty White and confirmed the prescription, and they said the prescription would be filled in a timely manner. So they're already lying to her. When Anderson called Thrifty White, she spoke with an individual who verified that the prescription would be delivered to the pharmacy the next day and the medication was covered by her insurance plan. So, great. But then they have a change of heart. Already, instantly, like less than an hour later, they change their mind. Anderson received a call from the on-duty pharmacist, Georg Bedeau. He informed Anderson that for his own personal reasons, didn't even say religious reasons, he would be unable to fill her prescription. She was confused by this statement and assumed that he meant that the prescription would interact poorly with one of her other prescriptions. She asked for clarification. He clarified that he did not want to fill her prescription due to his beliefs. He did not clarify what his beliefs were or why they interfered with his ability to perform his job as a medical professional. He did not provide Anderson with information about where or how she could get her previously agreed prescription filled. When Anderson pushed Bedeau to help her find an alternative, he informed her that there would be another pharmacist working the next day who might help fill the prescription, but that he could not guarantee they would help. He also informed her that there was a snowstorm coming and that a second pharmacist might not make it into work. Zero concern for the patients. Zero concern.
As we know, since it works by preventing ovulation, there is a very limited time frame in which the pill is effective.
So he's now creating the very situation that he wants to avoid. People with sincerely held religious beliefs about abortion don't want children to be aborted, and certainly there are religions that don't want contraception either. This person is delaying, and by delaying, they are creating the worst situation. They're creating the sin. This person is creating the sin they are trying to avoid. Their definition of sin. When Anderson asked about other pharmacies she could go to, Beidou simply told her not to try Shopko in Aiken because she would probably run into trouble there. Beidou only told Anderson about other ways in which she would be unable to fill her prescription. At no time did Beidou provide Anderson with the name of a pharmacy or pharmacist where she could obtain her prescription. Aiken, Minnesota is the closest town to McGregor with a pharmacy. Aitken has a CVS pharmacy and the Shopko pharmacy mentioned by Beidou. The CVS pharmacy is more than 30 miles from her home. Thrifty White is 10 miles from her home. After speaking with Beidou, Anderson called CVS to verify that she would be able to fill her prescription at that location. She did not call Shopko based on Beidou's representation that they would be unable or unwilling to fill her prescription there. When she called CVS, Anderson spoke with a female pharmacist. The pharmacist claimed that she was not able to obtain the medication from her wholesaler and that she would be therefore unable to fill Anderson's prescription. Anderson thought it was unusual that a CVS pharmacy would be unable to obtain Ella and was skeptical about the pharmacist's claim. Anderson thought that this was unusual because CVS was a large pharmacy chain and should have no trouble obtaining prescription medication. Anderson was further skeptical that CVS relied on a single wholesaler who was completely unable to provide necessary medications. CVS pharmacist number 1 offered to call the Walgreens in Brainerd to see whether they would be able to fill the prescription. She put Anderson on hold, and when she returned, she informed Anderson that she had spoken and that they were also unable to fill the prescription in Brainerd. Following this conversation, Anderson called the Walgreens in Brainerd herself to double-check. The pharmacist at Walgreens confirmed that she had just spoken to pharmacist number 1. The Walgreens pharmacist said that Walgreens could fill the prescription and that she had told CVS pharmacist this. The pharmacist at Walgreens clarified that there would be no issues filling the prescription. They could order the medication to be delivered the next day. They did express concern that with the impending snowstorm, the delivery may come later than usual. Anderson then called the Thrifty White corporate number. She spoke with an individual named Sue. Sue told Anderson that she could leave a message for someone named D. Anderson left a message for D, inquiring about the store's policy for refusing to fill prescriptions. After this conversation, she called her OBGYN back and asked them to resend her prescription to the Walgreens in Brainerd. Given her interactions with Beidou, she did not trust that Thrifty White would send the prescription to the Walgreens in Brainerd at their request. Once the prescription was transferred, she called Thrifty White back to confirm the name of the pharmacist, and she confirmed that it was George Beidou. The next day, January 22nd, Dee returned Anderson's call. She emphasized that the Thrifty White in McGregor was an affiliate store, independently owned and operated, provided her with contact information for the store's owner, Matt Hutera. Shortly thereafter, she spoke with Hutera. She informed him that George Beidou had refused to fill her prescription. Hutera told Anderson that Beidou had already informed him about the situation. He said that this was not the first time that he had refused to fill prescriptions based on his personal beliefs. He added that he was a pastor at a local church. No genuine pastor would care this little about a patient's rights. No one who actually believes in the Christian morals that I was raised with would actually think it's okay to lie and hurt a person like this.
And I thought we lived in a first world country. Like I shouldn't need to take an airplane to go get contraception.
Right. Anderson inquired as to whether the Thrifty White had any policies regarding a pharmacist's refusal to fill prescriptions. Hutera indicated that they did not have an official policy, but that he had informed Beidou that the proper procedure was to make sure the prescriptions got filled. Hutera told Anderson that he did not agree with Beidou, but he's a pastor. So he gets a pass. He just gets a pass. It's totally okay for him to get rights above and beyond others. He gets the right to control other people's prescriptions, even though they have been prescribed by a doctor who is more of a doctor than a pharmacist is. In other words, a pharmacist is not a diagnosing medical physician. A pharmacist fulfills the prescription and makes sure that they don't know that they're clear of interactions, make sure that everything's going to go okay with the medication. The pharmacist does not have the right to interfere with the medication, to prescribe something different, or in this case, to go out of their way to deny a person their prescribed medication. Even though this was not the first time he refused to fill prescriptions, Hutera did not indicate that there would be any repercussions for Beidou. Instead, Hutera told Anderson that Beidou might be disciplined for failing to make sure a prescription was filled if it happened again. Pharmacists and pharmacy owners generally must ensure all prescribed medications are dispensed. However, in 1999, the Minnesota Board of Pharmacy created an extremely permissive exception for dispensing emergency contraception. Under this exception, a pharmacist can decline to fulfill a prescription for emergency contraception, but they must provide an alternate way for the patient to fill their prescription. Arrangements must be made in advance, so the prescriptions are still made available immediately to the patient. Under the exception, it is the responsibility of the pharmacist in charge to make arrangements with a nearby pharmacy to fill these prescriptions so that the appropriate information can be communicated immediately to patients. And there it is. So the law and the rules do say that if he's going to impose his religious beliefs on others, he has to cure that imposition as well. If he's going to say, I can't fulfill your prescription, he then has to finish the sentence. He is required, he has an affirmative duty to finish the sentence and say, but I know who can, or I'll help you get it from these people, or whatever. He did the opposite of that. He did the opposite of that, and he's not even being punished for it.
Yeah, in my opinion, this is a predictable situation in which he should be having the same reaction like every time it comes up.
Yes.
It's expected.
So you plan for it.
Come up periodically. Yeah, that there should be a plan in place. And to not have a plan in place, I believe, is...
This is like not having a password on your corporate email account and then going, oh, how was I supposed to know someone would get in?
Yeah,
that's just stupid. That's just ignorant. That's willfully, stupidly ignorant. It's so willful that we know that it's just a cover, that we know that it's just someone saying, oh, well, I don't think I have to, I think I'm better than that. I'm better than you. I don't have to fulfill the basic rules and requirements of the job that I've chosen to be hired to do, that I've applied to do and gotten hired to do. So we know the story. She drove to Walgreens, snow was blowing, freezing on the roads, 100 miles round trip, temperatures below zero, with her 2.5-year-old son. So he's putting a child in danger, and he's putting a mother of children in danger. What an ass. So she successfully fulfilled her prescription, and she did not become pregnant. Great. Because then what? Are you going to try to get the money from them for the child that was now born because you delayed successfully? That's going to be an even harder fight. She now has to fulfill her prescriptions either in Aitken or Barnard, which require her to travel a considerable distance. So she's saying this is sex discrimination under the Minnesota Human Rights Act. Sex is defined to include pregnancy, childbirth, and related conditions under Minnesota law. Emergency contraceptives are only used by people who may become pregnant to prevent pregnancy. It is therefore illegal public accommodation discrimination to refuse to provide a person their prescribed emergency contraceptive. Defendants discriminated against plaintiff by refusing to provide her the medication, and the unlawful discrimination was intentional and performed by defendants with malice or reckless indifference to plaintiff's rights. I agree. I don't see how this is not reckless indifference or actual malice. They not just didn't fulfill the prescription. That would not be malice or reckless indifference, but they intentionally tried to stop her from fulfilling the prescription elsewhere. And that is just unforgivable. Not what Jesus would do. As a result of defendant's illegal conduct, plaintiff suffered emotional distress and has incurred attorney's fees, costs, and expenses. And then business discrimination, also under the Human Rights Act, and aid and abet discrimination. It is unfair discrimination for a business to refuse to do business with a person because of their sex. It is also unfair discrimination for a public accommodation to deny a person the goods and services of a place of a public accommodation because of their sex. Emergency contraceptives are only used by people who may become pregnant, and she was discriminated against by plaintiff intentionally aiding, abetting, compelling unlawful discrimination by refusing to provide the emergency contraception and by putting delays and obstacles in plaintiff's path by failing to provide her a reasonable alternative for securing her prescription. The unlawful discrimination was intentional and performed with malice or reckless indifference. So she asks for a judgment against them, that they violated the Minnesota Human Rights Act, a permanent injunction. Now, the injunction, because religious exemptions are in some form legal, the injunction will still have to accommodate the religious exemption, but it will say that these people have to actually follow the rules of religious exemptions. If they impose their religious exemption on you, they have to accommodate. They have to cure that. They have to accommodate you. They have to cure that. They have to still make your prescription immediately available to you. They're going to have to find a second pharmacist, or they're going to have to find somebody else to do it, but it's on them to do it. And if they don't do it, you have a claim, it appears at least, under Minnesota law. I'm not a Minnesota attorney. Don't take that as legal advice. Go hire this attorney. We'll see who it is at the end. Civil penalties, compensatory damages, punitive damages, enjoining the defendants from subjecting other plaintiffs to this treatment, pre and post judgment interests, and reasonable damage. Oh, they expect damages to be more than $50,000, which I think is part of the local rules of procedure. And this is Jess Braverman and Christy Hall. So yeah, I'm with attorneys Braverman and Hall. If you've been discriminated against like this, in Minnesota, contact those attorneys, because holy mackerel, they've hit the nail right on the head here. There is no excuse for this. This was an intentional imposition of that pastor's religious beliefs on a woman in violation of the law, and all the pastor had to do to accommodate the law and everything was to just help her get her prescription from another pharmacy or pharmacist. And instead, he put himself in between, inserted himself into the situation, basically modified her prescription. And I say that all of this is very violent because it caused her to have to take her 2.5-year-old son to drive through a snowstorm to try to prevent, a life from being born, and her having to take care of another child for 18 years when she's obviously made the decision of her own free will, knowledge, and agency that she knows whether she can take care of another child or not. And it is not this pastor's or this other pharmacist, because CVS Pharmacy did it too, remember? That it's not these people's decision to make for her whether she can afford a child or wants another child. Go read Freakonomics. They've done studies. When women decide to have abortions, which this wasn't even that case, but when women decide to have abortions and then later on someone independently evaluates the economics of whether that decision was the right decision, not morally, just economically. It was the right decision economically, and that person was not in a position to take care of a child. Now, what do you think happens to disadvantaged children who are raised and the parents can't afford them, and because they never wanted to have them and would have had an abortion? Well, those children grow up in some kind of neglect, and they grow up with some kind of lesser life. Not 100% of the time, but it does happen, and it happens a lot. It's worthy of looking into before we just automatically say, well, without any further knowledge, we automatically know that abortion is wrong. That's not the case. Go read Freakonomics. Obviously, I've gotten on my soapbox and preached a little bit, and that's a little hypocritical too. I don't want to preach too much. And I don't want to talk down to religious people. I'm just mad at this religious person.
Yeah, I mean, making somebody drive 50 miles both ways with a packed up 2-year-old and through a snowstorm. I mean, that's pretty much as extreme as this gets.
That's not what Jesus would make you do. I'm sorry. Jesus would have fulfilled your prescription. Like, come on. That's not the Jesus I learned about. It's not the Bible that I read. I'm not sure. Are these people reading only the Old Testament, yet calling themselves Christians? I don't think that's how that works.
That is pretty draconian.
Yeah, right?
It sounds like a really weird sitcom, Jesus the Pharmacist.
Yes, we should do Jesus the Pharmacist. Isn't there one right now? There's a Netflix show with gay Jesus. We should watch that.
Possibly.
This stuff with this religious exemption, when it's not done properly, it gets real weird real quick. Look at what this person went through, and all of these people were so quick to completely shirk their oaths and duties in favor of a 2,000-year-old book that hasn't been updated for the times. I don't see how that's not some kind of lunacy. Like, I spent 23 years in the church, and I'm still not entirely an atheist. I'm more of an agnostic. Why can we not all have our beliefs about where we are, who we are, how we got here, where we're going, what happens when we die, what happens before we're born? Why can't we have all those conversations without it being, well, no, you can't have contraception? I don't see how who we are, where we're going, where we're from, what our purpose is, what happens after we die. Those are all wonderful questions to talk about and discuss and even have Sunday masses about. But instead, so many people choose to take those wonderful, beautiful questions about humanity and higher powers and turn it into, well, I don't like you. And that makes no sense to me. And frankly, that's why I left a formal religious organization and decided to just live my life without a formal religious organization in it. I hope I don't offend too many of you with this, but I also am speaking from the heart, so it is what it is. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. That is our show. I am Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney. This channel would not be possible without your financial support on patreon.com/ljfrench and sponsors.com/law. Thank you very much to our December $50 plus supporters: Aspernari, John Steele, Gavin Barnard, Eevi, Kyle Mudrak, Michael Pearce, Spirit Bear, Negrey, Daniel Perez, Snorre Wisotzky, Blackleaf, Joe Tyson, Benjamin Hitov, Stephen, Rumble in the Bunghole, and Cute Grills in your area. And thank you to the $5 plus supporters who will be scrolling in front of me, and we'll usually put some video here for the crawls. I love you all. I will see you in the videos that drop. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, because this video is going to get to some of you late, and happy holidays. Love you all. Bye.